So this evening, I'd like to bring to you a short passage, and I've titled it "Add to Your Faith" because that's actually in the passage multiple times. And this is from 2 Peter, chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. 2 Peter, chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. So the passage says, "And beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. For if these things be in you, and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But he that lacketh these things is blind, and cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins." So this passage here, it has a stack, if you will. We're going to take this set of add tos, and we're going to build a pyramid scheme out of them. Not a bad pyramid scheme, but a pyramid of what God wants our lives to look like. This passage shows us the core structure of how our lives should be built. Each of these things is stacks on top of the other, and it all starts at the very bottom with faith. Faith is the foundation, and we stack each one of these blocks on top of it in a sequence until we have a pyramid of sorts. Each one, so starting with faith as the foundation, stack each of these units on top of it until you have the structure that's fully sound. Now, if you skip a part, if you skip your foundation and build your building, it collapses. If you skip a part of your building and jump ahead from any one of these parts, you end up with a structure that is not sound. It is not ready to stand. Therefore, the structure is not stable, and it is doomed to collapse. Anytime you build a structure, if you do not build it properly, and I remember Pastor mentioned this when we were talking about the modern society's modern ideologies want to rethink everything, and they want to build buildings that look completely throwing all the rules out the window or whatever. But they can't get past the foundation. They have to build, no matter how they want the building to look, they want it to look like it's an upside down pyramid, or no matter what they want it to look like, they still have to dig down and build a solid foundation. So our foundation is faith, and that's trust in Jesus Christ. That is, what do we sing as the kids' song? Faith is just believing what God says he will do. That is the foundation. You start with that trust. You start with that faith in Christ. That is your foundation. Without that foundation, you're not building any of these things. You're not going to, anything you try to stack on top of that is going to collapse. It's not going to grow at all. So first, we have in verse 5, add virtue. Virtue is goodness or moral excellence. And I'd like to define it as the internal determination to do what is right no matter who is watching. That is your true character. Is who are you when the lights are out? Who are you when when you don't think anyone watches you? And we see this in the world I live in at work, is that they'll do anything when they think nobody's watching. And then they're really surprised when we say we have video. So we are replacing the eyes of God in the business world with the eyes of management. We are replacing it with cameras because there is no fear of God before their eyes. So in this adding virtue, this internal determination to do what's right. You can have virtue without any of the other parts of this, but you have to have that foundation of faith. You have to believe what God says, and then say, you know what, I'm going to choose to do what's right. You don't get to say, well, tell me what to do, and I'll decide if I want to do it. That's not obedience. That is determining whether or not you want to do what you're told. The correct order is, I will do what you tell me to do. Now tell me what to do. Okay, so we see this a little bit in Joshua 24, verse 15. It Joshua says, and if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua didn't have the full revelation of the Bible. He didn't have the full, complete New Testament, Old Testament. He didn't have all that. But he said, what God told us to do, we're going to do. And what God tells us to do, we're going to do. So we are going to do what's right. We are going to have this virtue, this moral excellence, with this true character. We're going to have that. And we saw this in the virtuous woman from Sunday. This is a determination to do these things. None of the aspects of the virtuous woman were, she stumbled into greatness. She, in a drunken stupor, found the cure to cancer. None of that happens by accident. None of those great things, none of those excellent character qualities of the virtuous woman were things that just occurred. It required determination. It required moral character to be that kind of person. So on that foundation of faith, believing what God said, trusting His word, trusting Him, we build virtue, that determination to do what's right, to be what's right. Next, we add knowledge in verse 5. Notice knowledge isn't first. It comes after virtue. That's because, like we saw with Joshua, you don't have to know everything to determine in your heart to choose virtue. You don't have to know. You don't have to know what you're supposed to be doing to already determine that you're going to do the right thing. There's these hypothetical scenarios. Well, what if you were riding in your horse-drawn carriage, a big wagon through the open plains of wherever, and Indians attack, or there's a camp nearby, and if they hear you, they're going to come kill you, and so you try to go as quietly as possible, and the baby cries. So what do? Do you smother the baby to save No. That is a hypothetical scenario to try to trick you into saying, well, there may be times where it's okay to do the wrong thing. And if you take knowledge first and you say, what about all of these possibilities? What about all of these other things? If you take knowledge first, then you will argue your way out of choosing to do what's right. And so knowledge comes second, because you have to have that determination to choose what's right. And why does it come second? Because in 1 Corinthians 8:1, when the Apostle Paul is talking, he says, now touching the things offered to idols, we know that we have all knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. If you let knowledge puff you up, if you let knowledge be that first piece of the foundation, then you will be more likely to make choices that will lead you astray. You have to choose. We're going to do what's right first, and we're going to learn what that will be as we explore the Bible. Once you have that foundation of faith, that's trust in Christ, you determine to live a life of virtue, choosing to do what is right. Next, with that determination, you begin searching for more revelation. You don't go searching for knowledge before you've determined that you're going to do what's right. Yes, Lord, I will do what you want. Now, what do you want me to do? It's not the other way around. Well, what do you want me to do? I'll decide whether or not I'm going to do it. No, it's yes, Lord, I'll do what you want. Now tell me what you want me to do. So we have the foundation of faith. We've stacked virtue on top of that, the decision to do what's right. Next, we stack on top of that knowledge. So we're learning what we should be doing. Once we're learning what we should be doing, we need to, in verse 6, add temperance. Temperance is that self-control, being even keel, or perseverance. We have examples in Titus. The Apostle Paul is speaking, and he's talking about potential leaders in the church. And he says that these people should be a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate. There's more to that, but you think about how easy it would be to learn something and then take that off the deep end. There are many examples where somebody has decided to study and study and study and study, and then they become too heavenly focused to be any earthly good or whatever. There's a point where your knowledge, even if you've decided you're going to obey it first, if you're not tempering that knowledge with obedience and with other parts that you should have, the self-control, you could very easily go off the deep end into theology or other things that can distract you from godly living. In chapter 2 of Titus, speaking of instruction to all men, he says to Timothy that he should be telling them and he should be preaching to them that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in the faith, in charity, in patience. So once you've determined to live a life of character, you gain the knowledge of how to live, and the very next building block is to stabilize that lifestyle. That's where your temperance comes in, is begin gluing those together, if you will. And I wish I had time to come up with a nifty pyramid. You'd think of a pyramid with flat stacks on it. You could just stack one on top of the other, get them out of order, and they'd probably still be okay. We've all played Jenga before, where you pull the blocks out, and it stays stable for a while there's missing pieces. But I didn't have time to do a nifty little diagram here. And it would be interesting to actually make each of those pieces in a way that they don't stick together unless they stick in the right order. But temperance, we're stabilizing our lifestyle. So don't get excited easily. Don't let your emotions take over. That's what temperance does. It slows that process down. Calm down. Don't get so excited. Take a temperate, a self-controlled, and even keel view as to what's going on. Don't let those emotions take over. Have you learned something new? Don't let a little knowledge cause massive course corrections. Now, maybe you were going toward the path of sin. You were, going the wrong direction, and you did need to make that change. That really should have happened in the faith and in the virtue point. But if you've realized that now, oh yeah, that is wrong, I didn't realize it, or whatever, okay, you need to make some changes. But just because you've learned about maybe some offerings in the Old Testament, don't go out and start slaughtering animals. That probably is not the right idea. Don't take a little bit of knowledge and cause you to shift your entire focus. Stay temperate, keep some self-control, some even keel attitude. What does it take to get you riled up? Think about it. This is the characteristic of somebody who they go off the deep end, or they react violently or in anger very quickly. This is someone who's not temperate. So building that faith, that virtue, knowledge, and putting that temperance, gluing it, calming it down, keep making it stable. So we've added temperance to our lives. Next, in verse 6, we add patience. And this is actually this part right here. You get to show some patience. Because I didn't get to finish this slide. So I asked for some patience. And what is patience? You're waiting. Yeah, that's actually written up there that you're supposed to laugh at me. Yeah, but, my mom did. But you think about it. So you get to this point where you're progressing. You're building these blocks into your life, and you're gluing it all together. And you can start to grow quickly, and you realize, this is really cool. And you start looking around at the others behind you, and they're not keeping up. You need some patience with those other people, because not everybody's going to progress the way you progress. Not everyone's going to learn math the way you learn math. Not everyone's going to be learning English and spelling and parallelograms, which I don't think are in English or in spelling at all, except the word parallelogram. So show some patience. You think of and now I got the example, I just didn't get it typed in here. The servant who was forgiven a whole lot. He had squandered his Lord's money, or his possessions, whatever they were, and the master came back and said, you need to give me all the stuff that you owe me. And he says, Master, be patient with me and I'll pay you everything. And he was ready to throw him in jail, but he said, okay, I'll give you patience. I will have some patience, and I will give you some time to come up with what you owe me. And what did that man go and do after he was forgiven all that great amount? He went to the guy that owed him 50 cents and wrung him by the neck and threw him in jail because he didn't have it, and he said, I'm not going to be patient with you. So if you think about it, God has had a lot of patience with us. I don't think anyone here would be arrogant enough to say, God and I are on great terms. I've always done what he wanted me to do. He hasn't had to have a lot of patience with me. No, we would all say God's been very patient with us. We need to learn patience as we stabilize our lifestyle in this growth pattern, to be patient with others as well. Once we've not mastered that, because none of these are all like get it perfect before you move on, but build it as a block. But once we've got patience pretty well figured out, we're going to have patience. We need to add godliness. In verse 6, we add godliness. And we already saw that a little bit with God having patience with us, but now the specific focus is to be godly. Well, what is godliness? It's being like God. Duh. Well, what's God like? Well, go back a few more pyramid steps, and you should have more knowledge. You need to have that knowledge of who God is and what is he like. This is a call to action based on the knowledge that you obtained earlier. So how does God treat the lost sinner? How does God treat his people? How does God respond? How, you think of, and I'm out of order here, but we'll get to it later. But think about it. Now, I mentioned earlier, don't get these out of order. You don't want to get knowledge before virtue, because if you get those in the wrong order, you will start to justify doing the wrong thing, because your knowledge says that would be a smarter idea than doing the right thing. Remember, Adam and Eve jumped ahead. Remember? They're supposed to be godlike, right? Hey, we're supposed to be godliness, right? We want to be like God. And so they jumped ahead. They decided to become like God. You remember that? In Genesis 3:5, Satan told them, God doth know in that day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. That was a true statement coming out of the devil right there. Yeah, God knows that you'll know good and evil, but God told him, I'm the one to tell you good and evil. You're not supposed to eat of that tree of knowledge of good and evil. You get the knowledge of good and evil from me. That's what God told him. And so they looked at it and they said, well, maybe that would be a better way to do things. We wouldn't need God so much to tell us what's right and wrong if we knew it for ourselves. And we could justify Adam and Eve all day long, but they got this out of order. They skipped the part of virtue. They skipped the part of obedience. They skipped the part of knowledge. God said, don't eat it. Why not? Because the day you eat it, you'll surely die. They skipped those and they went straight to, well, we're supposed to be godly. We're supposed to be like God, so let's just go ahead and learn everything we're supposed to know. We're supposed to know this stuff. So they got them out of order, and we all know where they ended up. They missed the foundational building blocks of virtue and knowledge. They didn't stack them in that order. They got them out of order. They got into trouble. Wanting to be like God. We used to, when I was a teenager, it became really popular to do those little wristbands that say WWJD. What would Jesus do? I always thought it was just a fad, and I knew a lot of people that wore those WWJD bracelets that they weren't acting like Jesus at all. So I didn't ever, maybe I had one at one point, but that didn't seem like something that I needed as a reminder. What would Jesus do? I thought it would be better to make a bracelet that said, what did Jesus do? And that way you could focus on that. Whenever anyone shows you their WWJD, you'd show them the WDJD bracelet. Mine's better. So collect up this knowledge that you've received. You've already made this the basis of faith, and you've made the foundation of virtue there. Take that knowledge and activate it with the virtue you've determined, and take action in a temperate and patient way. We are going to become godly. You're going to add godliness to your faith. And then, verse 7, we're adding brotherly kindness. So now you're in a pretty good shape. You're trying to become godlike. You've already decided you're going to do what's right. You're learning like you should. All these pieces are starting to grow together. And where are you? Well, you're probably in church. You're probably gathering with other Christians. You find yourself in circles with other Christian people more often. And what do you realize? You realize that they're not as good as you. They're not keeping up. It's easy to get to this point and develop some pride in how far you've come. That can easily turn into disdain at those other Christians around you not progressing as well. Oh, look at these baby Christians. They're still doing these basic sins. They're still They don't understand their Bible. They ask, what about this? And duh, that's, there's like 15,000 passages and I could probably quote them all to you. That's so silly. You need that brotherly kindness. You need to say, hold on, as you're gathering together, you need to have kindness toward one another. It's very easy to get into arguments, and the New Testament talks about this, all these pointless debates of endless genealogies and things like that. Shouldn't be doing that. At this point, you're spending a lot of time with other Christians. Maybe you're reading a lot of Christian writers as you're developing your knowledge. You're learning, what does this commentator have to say? What does this person have to say? Maybe you're reading a lot of Facebook posts, people, saying, and it's a Christian-y thing, but and just nothing but critical about them because you're like, they're not doing what's right, and you can become very critical of other Christians. It's easy to find all their faults. If you look at Matthew 7:3-5, Jesus said, "And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye?" And we don't really use motes and beams as terms anymore, but they're chunks of wood. Even if they were the same size, and they're different sizes. You have a big, huge log in your eye, and you see a little tiny twig in your brother's eye. Okay, so why do you see that mote in your brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that's in thine own eye? Or wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine own eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. In this passage, we kind of leave this passage saying, see, you shouldn't be bringing up the faults of other people. You shouldn't be poking out what's wrong with other people. No. Both eyes needed cleaning. They did. Just make sure yours are clean before you start doing that surgery. So this is where you're tempering your lifestyle. You've got this brotherly kindness you're trying to keep together. Use some patience and wait. And when you see a fault in someone else, stop and ask yourself, how much of that is on me? How much of that is in my life too? And work on that. Still address it with your fellow Christian. Still address it with your brother. But make sure you're doing it in a way that's not hypocritical. Because that's not brotherly kindness. So we're adding to our brotherly kindness now charity. So with brotherly kindness, we're talking more about your interactions with your fellow Christians. And then when we get into charity, now that you've got those interactions with other Christians down, it's time to start working with the outsiders. This true Christian love, the selfless love toward others. We need to have patience in their shortcomings, and we need to have encouragement for them on their way, wherever they may be. And this is where you give of yourself. So this is true selfless love, the agape love. How did God, go back to being God, godliness, being godlike. How did God love other people? He loved them in a sacrificial way. And that's what we need to be doing here. We're doing that toward our brothers, but now out toward everyone else. So we add charity to our faith. And so these building blocks, which I didn't summarize them all here on another slide, but these building blocks all stack on top of each other, and they make a nice stable pyramid that's strong. It's able to withstand some criticism. It's able to withstand a little, some difficulties of life, changes in jobs, changes in family members, and life and death, and COVID and whatever. And this stable pyramid is nice and strong. And then we have, at the end here, in verses 8 and 9, we have a little bit more information about these. In verse 8, we see that your growth depends on these building blocks being stacked together properly. And if I go back, you stay where you are. You're all staying where you are anyway. Nobody's going anyway. Verse 8 says, "For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." So as a Christian, you should be developing other Christians. You should be growing other people. In the picture of being barren or unfruitful, you're not reproducing children like you should. It's not, your body's not functioning properly. And we saw that as a condemnation in the Old Testament The example of when Sarah was taken by Abimelech, somebody, God closed up the wombs of all the other women, and it's like, what's going on here? And God told him, "You're a dead man because you've got someone else's wife in your household." So that has always been a condemnation, that somebody is barren or they're unfruitful. They're not productive at all. And I talk to my kids all the time. We talk about being productive. Let's get the sleep that we need so we can be productive tomorrow. Let's be prepared so we can be productive. Our goal should be to be productive. And without these building blocks put together properly in the right order, we would be barren or unfruitful, meaning we're not reproducing even other Christians. We're not witnessing like we should. In verse 9, we see the example of someone who does not build these things into their life. They have lost sight of what is important. It says they are blind. They even struggle with the assurance of salvation. So you take all these things, if these things aren't structurally sound on your pyramid and based on that foundation of faith, that foundation of faith begins to crumble. And someone who does not have these things, does not show these things, even doubts their salvation. In verse 9 it says, "But he that lacketh these things is blind." They can't see what's important. They can't see where they're going. They can't see afar off. "And hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins." Our sin does not have dominion over us. God has broken that chain, broken that death grip that sin had on our lives that was dragging us down to hell. And if we are not properly growing in faith and building these building blocks in our lives, we will let the memory of those sins, or even the sins themselves, reach back in and grab onto our lives. And we will not he was forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. We'll forget all too easily, all too quickly, that sin has no power over us. Instead, we'll let it have power over us. And we may know of Christians who have gotten into things and have forgotten all about their salvation, the focus of the foundation of faith. So add to your faith from 2 Peter 1, 5 through 9. I hope that is a help to you all to think of it that way. Sorry, I don't have a picture of a pyramid to stack. Everybody knows what a pyramid looks, right? Okay. I think that's why the Egyptians had the Jews build those, so that we know what a pyramid looks like. So that's why they're there over in Egypt. Lots of pyramids. Comments or questions?